Using the power of the internet, you can now watch GLC on any TV in the US, Canada, the UK, and Ireland with Roku. Basically, a box that connects to your television. Roku acts as a middleman between your internet connection and your television. So if you have internet service at your home, chances are high that you can watch all of the great GLC programming. And best of all, it's highly affordable too, with only a one-time fee ranging from $50 to $100. Log on to our website, www.glc.us.com, for details on how you can watch GLC via Roku.
Well, welcome to the weekend edition of Update News. I'm Amy Cooper here with
Dr. Rick Waj. Good to be here, Amy.
It is good to be here. And
It's almost the weekend. It's almost Shabbat.
There is a God and He loves us.
Yes.
We made it through another week. It's amazing. It was a short, fast week. Accomplished an awful lot, which maybe we'll be able to tell you about a little next week. Right now we're going to do the weekend lineup. Friday night, 8 o'clock. Saturday, 2 p.m. Sunday, 1 a.m. Marty and Jennifer Getz. That was the first time that they ever came to GLC. And then, a program we recorded this week. You definitely want to catch this one sometime over the weekend. Saturday, 1 a.m., Saturday, 8 p.m., Sunday, 2 p.m., and Monday, 7 a.m. This is Bob Fu with Esther Zhang. Her husband and daughter just escaped from China. And not only do they tell us that story, but Bob tells us an awful lot of things you don't know about China.
It was fascinating.
Very. And then also we have Sandra Barras and Margie Pezderts, the girls, that's what I call them, and Doron Kedar, Saturday 5 a.m., Sunday at 8 p.m., and Monday at 2 p.m. Last but not least, Dr. Greg Romine with Call to Rescue, Sunday 5 a.m. and Monday at 1 a.m. There
Bunch
you go.
Bunch of courageous people, every one of them.
They are, actually.
Yeah, every one of them.
I hadn't thought about that, but they are. Okay, we are going to go to Jenny with the buzz.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Buzz. I hope you've all had a great week. I'm checking in this week to make sure you've told everyone you know about GLC Radio. We were so thrilled last week to announce that we expanded our broadcast repertoire, but we really need your help promoting it. It's really awesome being able to tune into GLC while at your office or driving down the road. Our website gives you all the information you need to know about how to access the radio broadcast from your computer or smartphone, but if you have questions, please don't hesitate to call us. Also, please let us know how you're liking this new edition by writing or emailing. Okay, I want to talk to you guys about social media. We've been working really hard behind the scenes to reach a wider audience through social media. So please, if you have kids, grandkids, or friends who are active on social media, tell them to connect with us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and don't forget we have a YouTube channel where you can watch tons of programs, including many from our archive. I know there are so many people out there looking for the truth that God provides through GLC, and social media can be an incredibly powerful tool for connecting us to people. So visit our main website to find out different ways to connect. Don't forget about this month's bookstore special, 30% off all DVD series and seasons. This is the perfect opportunity to get a great deal on that series you've been eyeing. Don't miss this opportunity to get the best prices on hours worth of wonderful teachings. In fact, I will soon be purchasing Uri Harel's Hebrew learning program for myself to brush up on my Hebrew. Nachon? Okay, we wanted to end this week's buzz with something for the kids. I know many of you purchased challah today at the grocery store, and some of you brave ones baked it in your home. For those of you who are unfamiliar with challah, it's the traditional braided bread that is eaten in Jewish homes on the Sabbath. It's not customary to eat it in Christian homes, but so many Christians all over the world find meaning and significance in making challah a part of their Sabbath meal. So in honor of the kiddos heading back to school this week, we wanted to share an idea for a little snack that we love to eat around here when anyone has leftover challah. It calls for 3 ingredients: Nutella or peanut butter, bananas, and of course, challah. So use your leftover sliced challah to make a classic peanut butter and banana sandwich with a little twist. I know this will be a favorite in your kids, grandkids, niece, or nephew's lunchboxes. Give it a try and let us know what you think. Remember, we have a very unique collection of Jewish and Christian children's literature. One of my favorites is This Child's Siddur by ArtScroll. Sometimes you can actually judge a book by its cover because this one is absolutely gorgeous, and so are the prayers contained within it. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much for your support. Enjoy your weekend, enter into his rest, and may he minister truth and peace to you and your family. Shabbat Shalom.
Now, does that girl have a great smile or what?
Those are great. Those are great shorts. They really are.
Yeah, she actually had to shorten that up because she had put so much in there when I watched it, and I missed that banana was misspelled, by the way. When I watched the long version of it, by the time it was over, I couldn't remember anything she'd said except about the challah and the Nutella and the bananas. So, there you go. That's how my little brain works. Okay, we've got a video with Lars Enerson, so we're going to go to that, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Shalom, I'm Lars Enerson with the Watchman International, coming to you with this report on the situation in Israel on Friday, September 5. The ceasefire in Gaza is still holding. However, the conflict is not over. When Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to a ceasefire with Hamas, he said that it was a great victory for Israel because Hamas did not get any of their demands met. Well, that is only partially true because Israel agreed to continue the negotiations with Hamas, indirectly with Hamas in Cairo, about the demands that Hamas has made. For instance, opening the border crossings into Gaza and also building a seaport as well as an airport. If Israel will not agree to any of these demands by Hamas, the risk is great that Hamas will begin the conflict all over again by firing rockets into Israel from Gaza. In fact, some of the main leaders now within the Israeli army are recommending Prime Minister Netanyahu to give in to some of Hamas' demands, because otherwise it is a great risk that Hamas will begin to fire rockets again into Israel. So we need to stand in the gap, friends, and really pray. We must also remember that from the beginning of the conflict in Gaza, the nations of the world, primarily the United States of America as well as the EU, adopted several of Hamas' demands, like opening the border crossings into Gaza, which would result in Hamas rearming themselves right away now after the conflict has subsided. And we said that God told us after the ceasefire was made that Israel has now granted Hamas a ceasefire. The nations of the world will now begin to pressure Israel to give in to Hamas' demands. And this is the situation we are now facing. So we need to continue to pray. Also, the borders to Lebanon as well as to Syria are continuing to heat up, and several mortars and rockets have been fired into Israel from those areas in recent weeks. The decision by the Israeli government to incorporate about 1,000 acres of land in the so-called West Bank in the Gush Etzion block south of Bethlehem to make it Israeli state-owned land where there is a possibility that they can begin to build houses and develop the area. This decision has been vehemently opposed by the international community. The United States is demanding that the government of Israel will take back this decision, in fact, because they say that it is not helpful in establishing the two-state solution, even though the conflict this summer with Hamas has shown very clearly that a two-state solution will not solve the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. So we need to pray because Israel is greatly pressed now by the nations to give in to the Palestinian demands. We also need to remember that this decision to incorporate some of the land in the West Bank into state-owned Israeli land will not change the situation for the foreseeable future. It will take years until houses will begin to be built in this area, if ever. Most likely, Prime Minister Netanyahu allowed this decision to be made in order to deflect criticism from the right for the way he has handled the conflict with Hamas this summer. If elections were held right now in Israel, according to polls, the right-wing party Jewish Home, led by Naftali Bennett, would increase their seats in the Knesset from 12 to 19 seats. Also, the polls have shown that when they have asked who is the leader now for the Israeli right, almost twice as many believe that it is Naftali Bennett and not Benjamin Netanyahu. We are praying, and we need to continue to pray for a leader and a prime minister in Israel that will boldly declare that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. And the first step that must be taken is to adopt the so-called Edmund Levy report, which was actually ordered by Prime Minister Netanyahu in order to find out what the legal consequences are of building in Judea and Samaria. The Levy report, it declared clearly that it is not against international law for Israel to build in Judea and Samaria. And that is, of course, contrary to what the EU and the UN, as well as the United States, are saying. So we need to pray that the government will adopt this report. Prime Minister Netanyahu has refused to do this so far because it would be a great obstacle to the two-state solution that he has said he is favoring as long as a Palestinian state will be disarmed or demilitarized. So it is time for us to pray now that Israel will not give in to the demands of the nations, but stand firm on the rights to their own land. I'm Lars Enarsson with the Watchman International. God bless you, and Shabbat Shalom.
You know, whenever I listen to the political things that Lars has to talk about and the juggling act that is always having to go on, it burdens me so for Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Right.
Keep him in your prayers. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult thing to be the leader of the country that even God himself says all nations will turn against you.
Yes.
And he has to do such a balancing act to maintain peace and security.
Yeah. I have so much respect for him.
Please pray for him.
Yes.
And first up, we have a very interesting little article that comes to us from the Inquisitor. You know what? They say hindsight is 20/20. In a time when many Americans wanted nothing more than to put the Iraqi war behind them and bring the troops home, former President George W. Bush's warnings fell largely on deaf ears. Yet in retrospect, Bush's words from a speech made on July 12, 2007, were chillingly prophetic. And now they're unfolding before our very eyes.
The speech was made at a time when congressional leaders and citizens alike were weary of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and pushing for withdrawal of American troops from Iraq. But Bush didn't believe that a withdrawal would be a wise or strategic move, and he predicted a number of likely outcomes in Iraq if the United States threw in the towel.
Part of the reason for the election in 2008 of President Barack Obama was the hope by some that Obama would end the war in Iraq. As promised, the United States began an 18-month process of withdrawal. CNN boasted of the exit of the last of U.S. troops from Iraq shortly before Christmas 2011, a move that the commanders on the ground had advised against. That exit left a vacuum in Iraq, one which has all too quickly been filled by the horrific Islamic State forces.
Former President Bush endured criticism from the media and ridicule from the pundits for his position on Iraq. He was mocked and scorned. There were even calls to prosecute Bush for murder for the deaths of U.S. soldiers in Iraq. But President Bush was right. Mark Thyssen, who was Bush's speechwriter at the time of the 2007 speech, said every single thing that President Bush said there in that statement is happening today. Thyssen recently appeared on the Kelly File with Megyn Kelly to discuss the speech he wrote for President Bush. Now, according to Megyn Kelly, it is point by point by point what we are seeing today. She called Bush's predictions eerie.
At about the 9-minute mark of the speech, Bush utters these words: "I know some in Washington would like us to start leaving Iraq now. To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we'd allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous."
President Barack Obama did withdraw troops before the commanders on the ground said they were ready to do so, reports Newsmax. Thyssen said that despite the commander's recommendation that 20,000 troops be left in Iraq, Obama left none. And when the peacekeeping forces left, the offshoot of al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Islamic State, came into power and has quickly grown in strength. And they were left unchecked. And now the mass killings on a horrific scale predicted by President Bush are today's daily headlines. Here's just a few of them. ISIS ethnic cleansing, 670 prisoners murdered in Shia prison massacre. ISIS massacres hundreds more Yazidis in Iraq. U.S. steps up airstrikes. ISIS video emerges online showing brutal beheading of Steven Sotloff. I survived an ISIS massacre. One soldier's unbelievable 3 days of hell. ISIS beheading children in Iraq.
ISIS has managed to carve out a huge territory in Iraq and Syria that it now controls. The ill-advised premature withdrawal from Iraq has led to the one thing that neither President Bush and his supporters nor his opponents ever wanted to see. It's a grim moment when the very thing that you knew would happen and you never wanted to happen, happens. It's not a moment for gloating or saying, "I told you so." It's a moment of heaviness and sorrow.
President Bush made it clear that abandoning Iraq would, quote, mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous. And much to our horror, his words are coming to pass. As the Islamist savages of ISIS drown Iraq and Syria in the blood of innocents, they make al-Qaeda look like child's play. One has to wonder how many now wish that America had heeded President Bush's chilling warnings about Iraq.
I actually reviewed that video of the speech, and those were his exact words.
It's
They
amazing.
were his exact words. And this article from ABC News: Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, AQIS, may be a new branch of the global terror group, but at least one of its primary aims is the same as the rest: to target the United States. Following words from Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, a spokesperson for the new group, AQIS, said in a video released online this week that one of its first goals is, quote, waging jihad against America and the system of global disbelief that grew up under its sponsorship.
The announcement of IQIS's establishment came as much of the Western world was focused on the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, a terror group that recently split from al-Qaeda's control, went on to take over large swaths of Syria and Iraq, and then declared itself the Islamic State, an apparent direct challenge to al-Qaeda's authority.
Zawahiri, who had public falling out with ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, did not directly reference his new rival's success in his portion of the video, but spoke about the unity of Muslim fighters, a possible glancing reference to the splinter group. Zawahiri referenced Burma, Bangladesh, Kashmir, and others as locations where, quote, your brothers did not forget you.
Approximately 400 people were killed in terrorist attacks in India in 2013, according to the START program, which the State Department said demonstrated that India, the world's largest democracy, continued to be one of the most persistently targeted countries by transnational and domestic terror groups. Other violence has been linked to transnational terror groups that India alleges are backed by Pakistan. The U.S. National Counterterrorism recognizes one major terror group as operating in the area, Lashkar-e-Taiba, an organization which has close links to Pakistan that is also believed to have been behind the Mumbai massacre in 2008. Well, that attack claimed the lives of more than 160 people. The Al-Qaeda Corps, which is situated in Pakistan, now recognizes major affiliates in North Africa, AQIM. AQIS in India, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, AQAP in Yemen, and Al-Nusra in Syria. The one thing we can be sure of is that both Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have their sights set on America.
Yeah, and they're in competition. That's what's amazing about it. They're in competition. Okay, the next article from Reuters. Berlin. German Chancellor Angela Merkel defended her government's taboo-breaking decision to send arms to Kurds fighting Islamic State militants in Iraq, telling Parliament on Monday that the group posed a major security threat to Germany and Europe. A day after Britain announced it would send anti-tank rockets, assault rifles, and hand grenades to the Kurds, Merkel said Germany had a responsibility to intervene in the conflict to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe in Iraq, citing evidence of ethnic cleansing by Islamic State fighters.
Germany, weighed down by its Nazi past, has shied away from direct involvement in military missions for much of the post-war era. And even in those conflicts where German troops have been involved, such as Afghanistan, politicians have tended to describe the missions as humanitarian, rebuilding exercises rather than war. Recent polls show that 2 in 3 Germans believe the government should not be sending weapons to Kurdish fighters, despite reports of atrocities committed by Islamic State insurgents. Critics fear the arms could end up in the hands of jihadists. Others worry that Germany, which has not experienced a major attack on its own soil, could become a target itself if it intervenes.
But Merkel noted in her speech that over 400 Germans and hundreds of other Europeans had traveled to the region to join the fight alongside Islamic State, sometimes referred to as ISIS. These fighters could return home at any time, she said, and therefore already represented a direct threat to Germany. Germany has already shipped humanitarian aid and defensive equipment, such as helmets and body armor, to Iraqi Kurds. On Sunday, the government released a new list, which includes 16,000 G3 and G36 assault rifles, 30 Milan anti-tank missile systems, 240 rocket-propelled grenade launchers, and 10,000 hand grenades.
The move comes 3 years after Germany came under sharp criticism from its allies and some critics at home for siding with China and Russia and refusing to back military intervention in Libya in a United Nations vote. Stung by that criticism, members of Merkel's new Grand Coalition government spoke out earlier this year about the need for Germany to assume more responsibility in foreign affairs. Since then, Berlin has played an active role in mediating in Ukraine crisis and pushing for European sanctions against Russia. The decision to send arms to Iraq represents yet another step in the direction of a more active foreign policy. Volker Perthes, the head of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, told Reuters, "It is clear that something is changing in Germany."
I think that's very, very interesting that since World War II, they have been reticent to take part in anything.
I think that's wise, too.
It is kind of wise.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I'm also surprised to hear very anti-Semitic things happening in Germany.
It's crazy that it's happening again.
Yeah, even there's this one guy who is a leader, like a mayor or somebody, who declared a certain city non-Jewish.
Right.
No Jews allowed here.
Judenrein.
Yeah, that's right. That's what that means, Judenrein.
Yeah.
Jew-free.
No Jews. Yeah, Jew-free.
And there was a big thing about that, actually. And it was the ambassador from Israel.
Who visited?
Yes, and by the request of some of the people living in that town.
Not him.
They requested that he come visit because of what this guy had done. So
Good for them.
anyway, and another article coming to us primarily from ABC News. Alarmed by the attempt by a 16-year-old French girl to travel to Turkey last week, and we started to share this story with you Monday. She attempted to allegedly join the Islamic militant army of ISIS. The French government is urging parents to call a toll-free hotline if they know of anyone they believe may be considering joining the terror group. It was the latest attempt by Western governments to prevent their citizens from joining the jihadist group, where they could be trained in terror tactics and bring those lethal strategies back home.
The French teenager was arrested Saturday in the Nice airport in the south of France as she tried to board a plane to Turkey with the alleged intention of joining ISIS in Syria. Authorities announced that several hours later they caught a 20-year-old man who had allegedly recruited her and paid for her plane ticket. The girl's parents reportedly had no idea about their daughter's plans, and the statement said that airport police were responsible for her arrest.
In a statement released Sunday, the Interior Minister called on the parents of young people to use the hotline if their children exhibit a disturbing trend of violent radicalization. The hotline was established just over 4 months ago, well before the American public began to realize the threat posed by ISIS. The French Interior Ministry reports they have received almost 300 calls in those 4 months. A quarter of those calls were about children who were suspected of getting involved with the terrorist group, and 45% were about suspicious women and girls. It's unclear how many of those calls led to arrest.
France is the Western country with the most citizens who have joined ISIS and militant fighters in Syria and Iraq. An estimated 700 French citizens have joined the cause, followed by 500 citizens of the UK who have come under similar suspicion. British Prime Minister David Cameron spoke at Parliament on Sunday and called for greater anti-terror legislation, including giving police the ability to seize passports at airports. He said that the measures will help address specific gaps in our armory. The British push to have police take passports away from suspected jihadist fighters comes nearly 2 months after the Australian government began to doing the same thing. An estimated 150 Australians are believed to have joined the fighting in Syria.
U.S. security forces took a different approach when they realized there was a 19-year-old woman in Denver who was planning on traveling to Turkey to join a jihadist group after connecting with a 32-year-old Tunisian man. The woman, Shannon Maureen Conley, had 8 interviews with police and FBI agents over the course of the 6 months leading up to her arrest at Denver's International Airport this past April 8th. The charging document reveals that she repeatedly spoke about her support of jihad and how she wanted to associate with terrorists in the hope of helping them. The Justice Department confirmed on August 11th that a plea deal had been reached in the case, but they did not release any information about what that deal entailed.
American authorities have not announced specific steps they have taken to prevent citizens from joining ISIS or other Islamic groups, though they have reported an estimated 100 or so cases of U.S. citizens leaving the country to train and fight with ISIS. Special attention is being paid to Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota, as nearly a dozen of the suspects have ties to the city. FBI officers have been aware of disaffected Muslim youths traveling abroad to join radical groups for years, as many Minnesotans went to fight in Somalia starting in 2007.
And I came across a very, very interesting article about the thousands and thousands of Somalians that they have brought here. And Minnesota is one of those areas. There's 4 different areas. Minnesota is one of them. Well, we sure do love you. We thank you for standing with us, and we really pray that you have a wonderfully blessed weekend. Shabbat shalom, everybody. See you Monday.